Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome to, welcome to this scenery if you are watching the screen of this staircase in Nassau, Bahamas. But welcome to this new moon forecast. We have a new moon in Virgo very early in the morning, Eastern Standard Time of the U.S. on the 23rd of August. We're going to go over the main astrological themes for the next 2 weeks, which includes an upcoming full moon that is also a total lunar eclipse. So there will be an eclipse forecast. It will only be available to Catalyst membership members. So if you're interested in that, this might be the time to check it out, dip your toe into what Catalyst membership is all about. And there is a link in the description box to go to the page to sign up and get more information. And I will say there are plenty of callbacks to the energy readings that have been available for the Catalyst membership over the previous weeks. I mean, it is basically promoting itself with the way the readings have prepared us and given us insight into the current energetic template to take us to these new and full moons. And certainly because we are now pretty much, for the most part, having exited the squeeze of the Lion's Gate. So welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate all of you so very much. And today I just didn't feel like being on camera. There's nothing really particularly wrong. I just don't, I'm deeply relaxed, and I think that I sometimes also get distracted with the camera, mirroring my image back. So I just wanted to cut that part out. And I am very deep relaxed, and I want to stay in that state and not get distracted by what I look like on camera, even though there's nothing any different than any other day. So the reason I'm so deeply relaxed is because I got a very wonderful and nourishing massage an energy work session this morning. I get them every 2 to 3 weeks, and I cannot stress enough how important it is to, find someone like me, which I did, thankfully, who is a massage therapist, but is deeply intuitive and practiced in their energy healing. So you're getting multiple layers when you get your body work, which is also what I do as well. So at least in some contexts, in the more clinical settings, people don't realize fully why they come out of the treatment room so deeply relaxed and in some cases refreshed. And it's because they're getting at least a taster, a little bit of the full potential that I can offer in terms of that stuff. So in terms of energy work and energy healing, along with the hands-on massage work. So, and the craniosacral therapy, which is just this beautiful bridge between the purely physical soft tissue manipulation and then the energy work itself. So very deeply relaxed. I feel like this is a perfect mode of being to go into not only the balsamic moon, which is right now, but then into our Virgo new moon. And Virgo, I mean, so many things about Virgo as a sign. One of them being the process of healing and the practice of self-care. And I'm not talking about the the Aries or even Taurus or Leo type of self-care where it's very much just based in what feels good and what we want at any given time, but the disciplined, consistent, service-oriented self-care, even service to ourselves. It's not glamorous. A lot of times it's happening underneath the surface. It is when we don't want to do those things that we discipline ourselves to do, and it cultivates patience. When we do that, it cultivates a sense of resoluteness in Virgo, that patience is essential and divine timing is everything. So we're coming off of a Leo new moon. We are coming off of this Lion's Gate, which has been by far the weirdest Lion's Gate I've ever experienced, is certainly in terms of when I started paying attention to these alignments. Mercury is soon coming out of its shadow. and it's stationed retrograde at the same degree of the Lion's Gate, which is the midpoint between the zodiac sign of Leo. We'll certainly be looking at the charts here in this forecast. But I knew that because Mercury was going to station retrograde at that same degree, that we weren't going to fully be consciously aware of exiting and being able to conceptualize that Lionsgate exit fully until Mercury came out of its shadow, which is happening pretty much at this new moon. And the reason I picked this image, if you are looking at the screen, or if you choose to look at the screen to see what I'm talking about at this moment, this staircase is, like I said, in Nassau, the Bahamas, and it was just from a family vacation a number of years ago. And I was just searching around for an image that might really reflect how I'm feeling about this upcoming Virgo new moon, the fact that we are about to exit out of an eclipse cycle and enter into a new one. This staircase really seemed to set the tone, because now we've exited the Lion's Gate and dropped our baggage. Maybe we've become aware of how much baggage we're holding. Maybe we've become aware of the fact that it's not even ours, that for whatever reason, karmically, contractually, ancestrally, we might have agreed to hold baggage that isn't really ours and made more sense in an old energy or in a purely 3D density type of world. But now that's been shed like the skin of a snake. We are still in the year of the snake. That has been shed. And that in itself is magnificent, right? It's freeing. And there's an awareness and a sense of wisdom that comes along with being like, whoa, I had no idea I was carrying that around. But now the real work starts. And again, that is a Virgo theme, is work. Your labors, your works, your period of putting your resources that you gathered into the growth of something that is going to perpetuate the cycle of life, right? The transition from Leo, which is purely very ego centered in our expression, which is not inherently a bad thing. It is our heart's desire manifest in some sort of creativity or expression, right? And that is that is the engine in a lot of ways. But Virgo is where the rubber meets the road, right? This is where, in the sixth house, the way that I read astrology, I often will counsel people on the sixth house as this is where you get your shit together, right? It's one thing to have an emotion or a sense of purpose that is connected to and moves through us as a passion, right? Even if it's a grief or sorrow, it's still a passion that moves through us. And that's all well and good. It's where you take that passion and you turn it into a process. It turns into a structure, into something functional. And this is a way back memory, not that far back, but it's a book called The War of Art, not the art of war. That's certainly an important thing to be familiar with, but the War of Art. And it was written by an individual who wrote a very famous book that then became a pretty popular movie, which was The Legend of Bagger Vance, right? And it's not about the story at all, although kind of. But this book was about what distinguishes between the amateur and the professional artist, right? Somebody who has made that transition. And it's Virgo. It's the sixth house. It is sitting down and writing, for instance, writing every day, even if you don't feel inspired necessarily, right? You got to keep that process. So our works, our labors, our service, our disciplines, our practices are all sixth house and Virgo energies, and you definitely have to exercise some patience and discipline to make it up this staircase that you see here, right? And this massive wall that's also on either side of this staircase. And there's like a whole history about that I'm not going to get into, but it really encompassed or encapsulated what I think is the real work is about to start. Now, 0 degrees Virgo is, the essence of the sign of Virgo. And if I could name this forecast anything, and so here's one of the first callbacks to all of the last like 2 or 3 energy readings from the Catalyst membership, like, wow, tell me what you think, that it had not brought us to this point already of like, whoa, we're kind of ahead of the curve. So when we come to these new moons, we're so ready to put that intention into these new seeds, is to see the beginning from the end, right? And that was actually a card that came up in one of the recent readings. And to see the forest for the trees, right? To be able to see the big picture first. And when you can do that, then you're able to be very analytical and specific about the steps. The steps needed to get there, right? You can see from this vantage point the top of the staircase and what it will take to get there. And then you are able to actually put one foot in front of the other and get up the staircase. Virgo is, all of the mundane astrology, like, oh, they're very controlling and, very anal retentive and all that. Sure, right? I mean, if you want to think that you are nothing more than a victim of your own astrology, you can think that way. And some people do feed into those more controlling and anxiety-ridden traits of Virgo. But it's really about the process of organizing and being very meticulous and disciplined. There's an incredible discipline that goes along with the sign of Virgo. It also represents the bearing of the fruit, right? When a plant is growing, it puts all of its energy initially. The seed germinates, and then the seedling pops out of the soil and starts to grow vegetative growth. The root system then starts to get deeper and more established, and then you get flowers, which is Leo. And then after pollination, the plant changes. This goes for any being that is, creating new life. The plant changes its focus, just like any other animal that is bearing life. All of a sudden, the root system is gathering the different nutrients from the soil. All of the energy is going towards the fruit that bears the seed, not the individual plant itself. This is why pruning is important, and making sure that the proper chemistry is involved as this is happening. And that's also Virgo too. Again, about patience in its perfect timing. You can't force the ripening of the fruit. You have to trust nature. So all of these themes I want you to keep in mind as we go through the actual astrology, because again, it's all amazing, those Leo moments of just like full, blissful, passionate expression or realization and creativity. Now is where the rubber meets the road. Now is one step in front of the other to get up those stairs, right? Leo is like, I'm inspired to get up that staircase, and you feel that inspiration. Virgo is like, okay, let's go. And it comes with all kinds of challenges, possible setbacks, doubts, fears, all of that stuff. And so these are the themes of Virgo. And I assure you, when we start looking at the astrology right away, there are so many things that are going to cause anxiety. They're going to cause experiences of being out of balance internally. There's a lot of inconjuncts to this new moon, a lot of them. A square to Uranus, right? Those are always fun times. Uranus being the trigger of awakening or freedom or in rebellion in some cases, being at the very beginning of Gemini. Virgo and Gemini, both ruled by the planet Mercury, right? And Mercury in Gemini is about the dance between the light and the dark, the good and the bad, whatever the polarity is, right? And it's about how we gather knowledge, information, how we conceptualize the world of ideas and language. Virgo is where we blend those things. They bring them together. Again, it's the functionality of what is structure or resource, which is, Taurus in the second house. And so now that Mercury is coming out of its shadow, I mean, it does relate to where Uranus is, but it also is relating to where the sun is and where this new moon is. And, you don't want to go backwards, right? Mercury going in Leo, moving back towards Gemini, I guess if there's no time, then that doesn't matter. So anyway, let's not get too out in the weeds here. Let's stay very practical, which is a very, again, Virgoan type of theme, is that practicality, because you have to actually put one foot in front of the other to get up this staircase. So I'm going to bring up an image of our handy dandy lunation cycle so we can remind ourselves here where we are in the lunar cycle. So we started with a Leo new moon, right? It was opposite Pluto. We had the Lion's Gate at the Aquarius full moon, right? This dichotomy of the heart and the circulatory system, right? The network that Aquarius represents, right? When each individual is authentic, and when we come together, then we're able to create a network of that resonance throughout a larger context, a social organism, an organization, a civilization, if you will. So, and Leo is about independence. And in fact, the new moon itself was about maintaining that independence no matter what else is swirling around us. And it does require that we have a buffer, as we talked about for the full moon forecast, that we have a buffer, that we protect that which is not just valuable, but, we know where we end and the rest of society begins. And we also know that what we each individually put out there is going to have an effect on the quality of the network we're part of. And so there's a responsibility that's there as well. So we're finishing up that cycle. We're in the balsamic. So let's look at this real quick if you are looking, in fact. If not, I'll be reading this. So this is from our good friend Dane Rudger. He is my astrology spirit guide, animal, whatever you want to call him. This lunation cycle and he has a book about the lunation cycle I found really, really helpful. So this diagram shows the eightfold path of the lunar cycle and what each part of the cycle represents. And so we're on the balsamic moon phase. We're in the very last 45 degrees of the lunar cycle. So this is a time where we mutate our consciousness. We distill and transform. We are absolutely reducing everything down to its base essence and transforming it. And that's the mutating of our consciousness. We're preparing for a new seed point, which is this Virgo new moon at 0 degrees Virgo. And we'll get into all the Sabian symbol language and its connections in the astrology chart really, really soon. So, but I just want to bring up the balsamic moon phase so that we are aware of where we're at. So it also represents, because this is a multi-layered cyclical diagram of transformation. Not only do we have all the different aspects of the lunar cycle, but on the inside you have the solar cycle as well, because actually the lunation cycle is a relationship between the sun and the moon, how we express ourselves outwardly by the sun, how we feel on the inside, and our subconscious is the moon. So we're also, a balsamic moon phase is basically the same as, the end of the solar cycle as well, before leading up to the winter solstice. So it's the depth of the dark, right? And it's when the seed is released into the darkness. And so it's not a great time to try to manifest things in particular that haven't already been in the process, right? I mean, the seed has already been released into the environment, and it is released into the soil, and it needs to have a time of very deep inner hibernation, so to speak, right? And the seed starts to germinate well after, the winter solstice and the birth of the sun. But we're in a time of the depth of the darkness, right? And so some people may be going through a dark night of the soul period right now and experiencing it very personally. So, but whatever it is, you don't necessarily want to get too wrapped up in making new decisions, especially with the sun, the new moon itself being square to Uranus. It'll be very tempting to do that because, the anxiety of that type of square really triggers people to try to bust out of something. And I'm not suggesting that there aren't moments where taking an opportunity that kind of comes about seemingly randomly is a bad thing. It's just that these balsamic moon phases were very still. And that's why I'm very grateful I got the body work that I did. It was just, I feel very deeply relaxed and very still and, really letting go of a lot of the anxieties and fears that have been plaguing me and that we saw a lot in the last energy reading that I did for the membership. So I just wanted to, remind ourselves where we're at the balsamic moon phase, right? This is not just me forecasting what's going to happen to you. This is about me teaching you how to read these temporal maps and especially the astrology, but also to give you my read and share my experience as well. So let's look at the astrology, shall we? Let's see if yes, I did pull it up appropriately. So I'm going to share the screen and we're going to go into this piece by piece, as we usually do with these new moon forecasts and full moon forecasts. Now stick around, friends, because I am going to talk about the eclipse and the eclipse cycle and the eclipse forecast as well. So just to kind of give you an idea of what to expect and where it's all going. So here we are. I'm going to do a little bit of formatting so that it looks, there we go. The thing about Virgo is that they tend not to shy away from hard work, and especially if you're a Lyran starseed. And we talked about that a couple of months ago, right? When we had the Lyran Capricorn full moon. So right after the solstice, I believe. Yeah, it was right after the solstice, before Uranus came into Gemini and the 4th of July transits, all of that stuff. The Lyran aspect was really strong, and there's a connection to Virgo as well, to the Lyran system, that if it was in your chart, that's how I would read it. So, Virgos don't shy away from the work. So if you are a Virgo strong person, sun, moon, or rising, of course, or you have a stellium in Virgo, you have other aspects in other charts that are strong Virgo, like I think you're going to be like, oh yeah, this is my wheelhouse here. This is where I really shine. Something else to consider if we're going to talk about Virgo is this is where the current south node of the moon is, right? And so we also can get an idea that the real work of Virgo in this instance, because we're going to have eclipses along this axis in particular, definitely the full moon lunar eclipse is going to be along the Virgo Pisces axis, is what we're leaving behind. And so the work itself is really about the clearing and the elimination and the letting go, which is perfectly appropriate for the Lionsgate energy that we just went through, right? And the more that we're willing to let go and be honest about what it is and do the work, right? It's not always going to be apparent where these fears and these doubts and anxieties are really coming from, but spirit is definitely giving you what you need when you need it. And it's up to us to be able to listen and interpret. But this is really about letting those things go, just like, any being, right? Whether it's a plant, an animal, a human that is gestating new life, any mother, basically, it becomes not about the individual anymore, but the individual is the one doing the work to support the growth of the fruit, right? That bears the seed of the next cycle. So, but we're leaving behind, and this is the Virgo South Node, the fact that there is a new moon and an eclipse at a total lunar eclipse. So that means it's going to be right on the axis of the nodes of the moon, right? The trajectory of our soul. And so we're all leaving behind so many layers, so many things that are at a soul level. They may not even be from this lifetime. They are ancestral. Maybe they're karmic. They're on a different, they're galactic even. There's a lot. And so it takes work, right? Think of the staircase again. So starting with the new moon, 0 degrees Virgo. Actually, I want to bring up today real quick, because what you see here is this square of Venus and Chiron. And Venus is finishing out her transit of Cancer. She's going to come into Leo. So another callback to the Catalyst membership energy reading. You guys will, this came up in the follow-up that I just did. So I did a reading for the third quarter moon, and it was really intense, for myself included. And so I felt really called to do a follow-up with some things that came to my attention, a couple days after I had done the reading, and after going through my own experiences of it. I did a follow-up, and what I'm about to share with you, you folks that got it, you're gonna know exactly what I'm referencing here. So, Venus in a square to Chiron, it's really just bringing up a lot of wounds of self and value, especially our emotional wounds with Venus and Cancer. And Chiron and Aries, self-worth, our capacity to really be the author of our own destiny, or not even destiny, but the author of our own experience. I think we're really addressing those things now, especially in this retrograde. So this square that is exact today on the 22nd is going to be very impactful, but it's also going to, the potential here is really strong, especially late degrees of Cancer, because we get very insular. Because we're very rooted and very stabilized by a particular feeling or a container, right? And so we kind of have to go forward from here, just like the plant can't regress back to a seed state if it doesn't like, where it's been planted. Now, there's always transplanting, there's always uprooting, there's all kinds of things that can happen. I really like using plants and the plant cycle to demonstrate the astrology, because it works really, really well. So that's why I keep bringing it back to that. So, and I think it's really helpful if you happen to be a person who's into gardening or horticulture and you're learning astrology. I found that to be really helpful to wrap my head around the cycles and how they all the different components interact. Anyway, Venus is in these last degrees of Cancer squaring Chiron. So it's going to bring up a lot of potential to heal stuff about, just because it's insular and contained, it doesn't mean it's healthy, right? And that's the thing about the fourth house and Cancer. And so Venus is a planet that really elicits a lot of very sensual feels. And I mean that quite literally, that we feel the value of anything, relationships and resources and anything material in our lives, but it also can be the nature of relationships. And it really, it gets us in our feels, not emotions, but in our intuition, in our gut, in a lot of cases with Venus, right? It tells us what actually is valuable and meaningful. And so in Cancer, then you have to, about family dynamics, identity with a certain lineage, for instance. And just because it is contained or has a strong connection. Now we're talking possibly like ancestral lineages, ancestral lines, certainly within your own family in this lifetime, emotional dynamics that may be healthy, unhealthy. This square to Chiron and our questioning of whether or not we can actually make these changes to our own personhood despite this stuff is going to come up. But there's a catharsis here that is really, really powerful. And, I was living this today as I was working with with the healer, basically, and starting to really unpack certain things about ancestral wounding that's not even mine, that I've been carrying around and at one point agreed to, but now it's not part of where we're going. So that's an example here that it can be very cathartic, but there's some sort of confrontation karmically that has to come up, and it brings all of these things up to the surface, but it needs to happen in order to heal it. So Venus square Chiron. Now that means that Venus is soon going to come into Leo. And I want to show you the card. So pay attention, Catalyst membership. I want to show you the card. Venus in Leo represents, dun, 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 we've already talked about this, the Seven of Wands. Okay, so as you can see, this individual might have the higher ground, but is definitely in a battle. So again, there is a fight, right? There is a battle. But there's valor that comes from this as well. But it does imply that there is a type of fight or a battle or resistance that we're going to fend off when Venus comes into Leo. Now, it represents our ability to stand up for ourselves and to take this position when Venus comes into Leo, but it doesn't come without a little bit of damage, I should say, right? Or at least having to output some energy. And I feel like this connection to Mars is actually a lot part of this card of Venus and Leo, or the Seven of Wands, because, Venus isn't a fighter, right? I mean, Venus just in Leo is going to represent the value of our own creative expression and our passions, but we have to act on that, and that's where I think Mars comes into effect. But this Venus coming into Leo, the battle will ensue, right? We're going to have to take the initiative to fend off and gather the energy that is ours to begin with, right? So, all right, let's go back to the chart. I just wanted to bring that up about Venus coming into Leo because it's very soon. It's during this next 2 weeks leading up to the Pisces full moon, which again is a total lunar eclipse. So let's go back to the chart and make sure that everything here is formatted correctly. It sure is. All right, let's start moving forward. Actually, I'm going to close out a couple things before we move on. Less for me to get distracted. Okay, so 8:23, we're going to look at our Virgo new moon at 1 to 1 degree of Virgo. So in Sabian symbol language, we are going to, let me open this up a little bit. Here we go. Sabian symbol language, we're always rounding up. So this is going to happen really, like I said, really close, very early morning Eastern Standard Time on the U.S. So as you go west in the United States, it's going to be, in this evening, the 22nd, just depending on where you are. And you can already see that the quincunxes are building. And in fact, the quincunx or the inconjuncts that are involved are Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, to the new moon itself. And it's actually creating a yod, right? Or a finger of God or a finger of destiny, pointing to what? The new moon. So we also know that the essence of this new moon and what it represents is something we really want to put our energy towards in order to find some sort of balance, right? If we try to rely on trying to shove a square peg into a round hole, which is what a quincunx really is, and in conjunct with Saturn and Neptune and in conjunct with Pluto, and even this square that's building with Uranus, if we try to make any sense out of those things whatsoever, we're going to have a rough go of it. And we don't want to put that energy into our intention, right? So focusing back on the essence of the new moon itself, where you see the finger of God or the yod, is going to give us, this is the direction of the path, this is the pathway we want to take and the direction we want to go, right? And focusing here. And again, that Virgo energy, especially 0 degrees, I mean, we're getting, it is the essence of Virgo, and that's very focused, right? It's very focused, it's disciplined, it's practiced, and it's able to see the forest from the trees. It's able to see the beginning from the end, okay? So, Sabian symbol. In a portrait, this is 1 degree Virgo, in a portrait, the significant features of a man's head are artistically emphasized. So you get the significant features, but you also get the entire portrait. The capacity to picture to oneself clearly the salient features and the overall meaning of any life situation. Okay, so to see the beginning from the end, right? To be able to visualize the end and not just intellectualize it, but feel it, live it, be there, right? And then from there, where to go from there is going to become very apparent, the steps needed to go there. As long as you continue, and this is like, the trick to manifestation. It's not just thinking about what it is you want because you don't have it. It is about living in the feeling of already being there, because everything has already happened. It's all happening at once. So there is a reality where those things are happening. So again, discrimination through analysis and intuition. The ideals of an inner life are given their outer manifestation. So through some type of responsibility that we accept for ourselves. It's about character. That is the first half of Virgo as a whole, is character. So it's a very clear vision of each emerging opportunity in life. This is the new moon. This is the essence of intention that we want to set in order to emerge. And, knowing where Virgo is in your chart is certainly very useful. And if you have progressions here, what's your draconic chart look like? What is your tropical or Western astrology? What's your galactic astrology? What is your sidereal astrology? It's actually quite a complicated language, but it gives us a lot of insight on how to navigate these patterns of frequency that are part of the divine blueprint. It's wonderful. So right away, though, like I said, the quincunxes. So generally, a sun in a quincunx to Saturn really creates, any quincunx is going to create an imbalance. But when you're talking about Saturn, the planet of structure and responsibility, and the sun, which is what we want to do, it's who we are in expression, it's an imbalance between what we want to do and what we must do. So there are restrictions and obligations, and we may feel like those things hamper our freedom or self-expression. Now, the thing that's good about Virgo is you can take that imbalance and use it as a means to discipline yourself or practice something, or focus, maybe take the energy of upheaval or imbalance and channel it into a process, right? So right away, there is a potential there for that. So there's lots of ways this can express itself, but it's important with any quincunx. You're not going to fit the peg in the square peg into the round hole. You're never going to do that. But what you can do is find balance within yourself when things outside of you feel unbalanced or restrictive, or like you're just not getting anywhere. So be flexible, adaptable, open-minded as you adjust. Maybe you're getting more responsibility. Maybe you're getting less responsibility. Saturn in retrograde in Aries, I would say that we're probably all getting the squeeze of more responsibility towards our subjective experience of I am, right? Especially at 0 degrees Aries. So previous mistakes, they could catch up with us, right? We could get sad, lonely, guilty, worried, fear. Oh, wow. All of those things, we're all experiencing them in some way. There may be disappointment. You may face criticism. You might miss out on something in terms of a job application, a promotion. You might get held back in some way. But the imbalance here could arise really from your goals and what other people are expecting out of you, right? Because Saturn, again, has a lot to do with responsibility towards those who are part of your community, right? Or an authority figure, or a parent, for instance. So there's a lot of feeling torn between competing responsibilities. And ultimately, it's about finding that inner balance, right? So right away, there is a challenge with the sun and this whole new moon being in a quincunx to Saturn, being in a quincunx to Neptune. And Saturn and Neptune are going to be conjunct at 0 degrees Aries in February of 2026. This is huge. This is a huge transit. And so everything that is making either favorable or really uncomfortable aspects to these degrees where these two are at, taking advantage of the retrogrades right now to internalize that experience and work with it is really important. So again, same thing with the sun in a quincunx or an inconjunct to Neptune, right? it's a period of adjustment. There could be potential disillusionment, especially with Neptune. It's in its retrograde, so it's either like completely off the rails in La La Land, or it is a sobering awareness of disillusionment. So, reevaluation of one's identity and goals, I would say that is huge here, especially after you've left all that baggage behind. You're like, okay, now what? Like, I didn't even know that I was carrying all of this around. So now who am I? Now that I've, decided to let it all go, and I came through the gateway, and all of that stuff is dissolved and is left behind. So I feel like the challenge from all of these transits in a transpersonal way, you're talking about Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, even Saturn, are bigger than the personal planets in terms of our own experiences. So we can feel kind of disillusioned, our ego's a little bit weakened, we might feel less certain about our identity or purpose, and that's normal. But you also become attuned to more subtle feelings, impressions, intuitive insights. It's going to be important, again, you have to be able to see the beginning from the end. You have to be able to see the forest from the trees. You have to be able to see the salient features of your identity, and also being able to see the whole picture as well. Now, blurring of boundaries is something that happens with a Neptune in any challenging aspect to something else, especially the sun. And so the blurring of boundaries between the self and the external world can lead to confusion. And hopefully we already have gone through that since the full moon and the Lion's Gate, that we know where we end and the rest begin, and we're very aware of that boundary. So that can be challenged with this as well. But again, when you can see the forest for the trees, you know that, okay, this is the forest, but I know that these are each individual trees. So if you can navigate the challenges, this can foster a much deeper understanding of ourselves and our spiritual nature, and the spiritual nature of our I am, because that's the Aries energy. So there's a lot of escapist tendencies here. That's definitely a possibility, but also it triggers spiritual awakening and heightened intuition and creative inspiration. Now, the other part of the yod is to Pluto, 2 degrees Aquarius. Now it's retrograde still. An unexpected thunderstorm, a turning point in life that often feels like a mini crisis. You may feel buildup of pressure to an intense level. This is the sun quincunx Pluto. And then you put on top of it Pluto at this degree. Now 2 degrees of Virgo is even more troubling, because it is basically, the wisdom and compassion that can only be experienced through suffering and isolation, right? It's a large white cross. So on the one hand, we can identify with very personally this experience of, wisdom and compassion coming out of the suffering and isolation, right? It is the intentional, suffering and isolation that comes with Virgo that brings about enlightenment or illumination or awareness or awakening. So we can identify that all we want, but the transformational energy is so much more powerful with Pluto, and it's something unexpected. Now, it's the retrograde, so we might kind of get more of an echo of what this was when it was direct. And that was on January 21st, when the Sun and Pluto came into conjunction at this degree. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's something more on the political stage, something to do with the collective as a whole that comes about with this as well. But I have barely been paying attention, so I couldn't even begin to speak on anything at that level. But I wouldn't be surprised. So the quincunx to Pluto can really trigger people, and a lot of power plays, right? And especially if people are not identified with the real spiritual work of the suffering. And it's not like you have to suffer. That's not what I'm saying, but you can't really develop that type of compassion for other people who are suffering until you yourself have really gone through it. And that's part of the Virgo energy as well. Is like you can see the beginning from the end, but you're still living the step by step of it. And that is where the true wisdom develops. A positive response to this Sun quincunx Pluto is the sublimation of the ego and letting go, right? Trusting source, trusting spirit, trusting God in this process, because when your own ego and its expression is up against the transformative yet regenerative power of Pluto, especially at this point, it can really feel like a crisis, but a serious decision is best viewed as a self-improvement opportunity. So this is very transformational with Sun quincunx Pluto, right? So right after this, on the 25th, as we're going to see here, so this is all the new moon energy rolled into one, and the square with the Sun and Uranus, which is also, like I said earlier, it can really trigger people to like make very drastic changes because they're feeling that instability within themselves, right? And so we may find ourselves, again, there's a quincunx to Pluto, but it's going to square Uranus, and we might try to force an issue some way in order to get ourselves out of a situation, to feel this buildup of uneasy and anxious energy of impending change, right? So the tension builds and people can be very unpredictable here. So, or you may be subject to a radical change in your own environment or unexpected outbursts from people, especially when the moon is involved too. I would say it's not just the sun, but with the moon involved and being a new moon, that this may continue over the month, these unexpected outbursts of people that are not able to see the beginning from the end, if that makes sense. So an outburst of anger can show scary and unexpected sides of your own nature, especially if your ego is really strong and you are, again, not able to identify with the wisdom and compassion part of the suffering and isolation. So ego conflicts are very possible. And it's really helpful to have a safe and conscious release of this energy because it's impulsive and rebellious. And then you got the quincunx to Pluto, and it's just a recipe for just people, going completely erratic. So try, do your best, right? That's all we can ask of any of ourselves, is to do our best, but just be aware of the potential and try not to feed into it if you can possibly help it, okay? So it's when we come out of the weekend. So by the 25th, the Venus will come into Leo, and it's going to make all of very stable connections to every planet that is going to have an unstable relationship to the new moon. So Venus will come into Leo, and it's going to trine Saturn and Neptune. Let's see if we can, yep, here we go. Venus comes into Leo, almost, and then it's going to trine all of those. As I said, it's going to trine Saturn, going to trine Neptune. It's going to have a sextile to Uranus. And the only thing it's really going to have a troubling relationship with is its opposition to Pluto. So we'll get there. But in the meantime, Venus, remember, 7 of Wands, Venus comes into Leo and makes these trines, which is, especially with Saturn, right, very ideal for committing to a long-term investment, a relationship. And there's closer bonding and stability with Venus. And considering that it's in Leo and we looked at that 7 of Wands, I would say that this trine is really going to spur our ambition for the value of committing to the process of getting up that staircase, right? We might actually feel that passion again that gives us the impetus to hold our ground in order to achieve whatever it is that we have set out to do. It's and maybe this is about formalizing something. Maybe this is just making the commitment to ourselves internally with the retrograde of Saturn that this represents. It's going to sextile Uranus. It's going to trine Neptune as well. So just more compassion, more expression, a much more imaginative outlook with Venus trine Neptune. The sextile to Uranus really triggers that change and breakthroughs, but in a way that's very positive and harmonious. And then Mercury comes out of its shadow as well at this point. And so by the time we come out of the weekend and into early next week, I think we're going to start feeling a renewed sense of like, yeah, I know what it is, who I am and what my purpose is, and then start, at least making commitments to ourselves to be open to the blessings that are going to take us along that pathway. Okay. And then Mercury, like I said, comes out of its retrograde shadow, crosses the Lion's Gate itself, and we're in a whole new territory. Now, by the 27th, Venus will be opposite Pluto, just like the new moon was, the Leo new moon. It'll be in an opposition. And so they're very intense emotions, power dynamics come into play. There's a lot of potential for releasing old patterns and the potential for renewal here. So it intensifies feelings and can bring passionate connections, but also potential conflicts, right? Power imbalances, control issues, manipulation within relationships. I feel like that's really it'll come up to the surface, but it's going to also trigger endings and major changes and very profound shifts in existing relationships, especially when the value is now at the individual expressing and being authentic, right? Just like that Seven of Wands, that we rise to and take the higher ground, but that doesn't mean that we're complacent necessarily. So there are tensions between our personal desires and the needs of a group, especially with Aquarius, are going to come out as well. So now, the big thing, I think, in my opinion, is we get into Thursday of next week, which is the 28th, which is actually my dad's birthday. That means the sun's coming into alignment with Alpha Draconis. That is something to really pay attention to, but also Uranus and Neptune will be in an exact sextile, which represents spiritual awakening. So I don't know exactly what's going to be happening around this time. The moon also will square Pluto on this day, but this sextile being exact is something that is affecting people at a collective level. Uranus and Neptune are transpersonal. It is not going to be, who knows how it's going to manifest, but it represents spiritual awakening. Now, Neptune is retrograde, right? So, and Uranus is soon going to be retrograde. In fact, it stations during this 2 weeks. So closer to the full moon, of course, but you may begin to seek answers to philosophical questions that traditional religion or even science can't explain. You may become more concerned about the future and for humanity. You wish to gain a deeper understanding of how you are connected to others at the mass consciousness level. I also feel like that looking at the degrees that these two are in, also realizing, like having a full awakening of the blessings that are offered to us, and that when we're willing to really look at ourselves in the mirror objectively, that in itself is a gift, and to remain open and kind of innocent to the process, right? And so with this type of transit, you're going to get, things coming to you through dreams or flashes of insight, or even just interaction with people, like-minded people, right? Like a group, or if you do ceremony with people or church or whatever. It's common during this transit to become involved in some of these groups, right? So it's a really good time to create, maybe to invent. That's certainly the Uranus thing, especially if you've been blocked, experiencing a creative block, or feel that your life has stagnated. The changes in your life now lead to a greater sense of oneness. I think this is going to be pretty substantial. Now, right after that is when we have our first quarter moon. Here's the third call back to the Catalyst membership energy readings. Who knew we would be so ahead of the curve with those readings? Our first quarter moon, sorry. Look at that, moon in Sagittarius. Moon in Sagittarius. And in fact, it's really going to be very powerful, because the moon, it's actually going to be, the moon will be conjunct Antares, the star Antares, right? The heart of the Scorpion. So it's going to square the Virgo sun, and the moon in Sagittarius is the Nine of Wands, right? It is strength that is gathered through victory and valor, right? The sixth, the seventh, and even the Eight of Wands, which is swiftness, right? And then you come to the nine, and all of that energy is gathered in, and strength is demonstrated, a real like emotional strength, obviously, because it's the moon in Sagittarius. So first quarter moons are times where we're challenged in terms of action. What do I do, right? And yes, there is something distinctly original with the sun in Virgo here, right? That we want to be we want to express ourselves exactly how we want to. In fact, 9 degrees Virgo is an expressionist painter, originality, which is interesting because Virgo tends to be very much about the lineage and tradition as well. But this represents that experience of originality in how we express ourselves, right? The fruit, it's not a clone necessarily, right? It is something that is generated organically and has all its own traits and genetic blueprint. For instance, I'm just giving an example here, but it also represents like I am expressing myself completely originally outside of the confines of what has been established for me. Well, the moon in Sagittarius is a mother leads her small child step by step up a steep stairway. I think this real distinct, before we get to the beginning of September here, this first quarter moon, is that there's something to be said for being guided through a process that is not natural, right, to us. Stairs are not natural. I swear to you, I didn't even consider this when I picked the image that I showed at the beginning of the staircase. But I'm literally like, oh, a mother leads her small child step by step up a steep stairway. So, I mean, allow your emotions, your subconscious. And what is the moon but the ruling body of Cancer, the mother, right? Let that part of yourself or that mother archetype, whatever that means to you, to lead you, right, up this staircase. There is we can't just do it all on our own. And that's the other thing about Virgo. That's where the control, through lack of control in some cases, comes in with, talk about expressionism, right? Well, just whatever I want on the canvas. It is an original expression of who I am. We can't do it all. And as much as, we want to express ourselves, that's not getting us up the staircase. So there may be some instance of frustration or resistance, right? The little kid, as the mother's leading them up the steep stairway, you gotta kind of take one step at a time. And there may be getting tired, or perhaps you miss a step and somebody stumbles, right? It is about the encouragement and the process of guiding. So wherever that lands for you, I would say that that Nine of Wands is coming up pretty strong in terms of how we get there, right? And again, the beginning from the end. And that card has showed up at the beginning and at the end and in several personal readings throughout the last couple of weeks. So I have a feeling that this time period is really going to highlight this in a way that we can all wrap our heads around, especially those of us who have been on the other end of those energy readings. So once we hit September, Saturn's going to move back into Pisces. I feel like that's going to, strangely enough, a little bit of a relief. Saturn in Aries is at its detriment. It is weaker, and so it tends to either overcompensate or be a weaker structure. Coming into Pisces, I feel like that there will be some sort of spiritual responsibility that we're revisiting. But it also feels less like Saturn has to bear the weight of, that we have to bear the responsibility of everything. Once we come into Pisces again, like we're kind of dissolving back into the flow of all there is. And that's not a bypass so much as just like, oh, I don't have to hold it. It's not all about me right now. So I think we'll see how it goes. we'll see how it goes. And Mercury will move into Virgo, which is its home territory, and then do all the things that the Sun did: square Uranus, quincunx Neptune, quincunx Saturn, quincunx Pluto, leading up to the 4th. Now, and we're kind of getting close to the end here, guys, and my voice is getting very raspy, so I know that we're close to the end. So Mercury comes into Virgo. Like I said, it's going to do all those things. Mercury is way more powerful in Virgo. So I think those quincunxes and that square to Uranus, it's still going to be difficult, but I think it is going to be a point of practice to be like, you know what, I've already kind of gone through this with the new moon energy. Now it's time to start putting it into literal practice and functionality. Like Mercury's like, I can blend any opposition. I can take any experience of imbalance and transmute it into, a balanced position. So I feel like it'll be a little bit easier. We'll see. But I want to bring up before we get to the Uranus is going to station on the 5th and the 6th of September. And right before that, Mars is going to square Jupiter. And that looks like it's on the 4th of September. I can't believe it's September almost. It is really, for time not existing, it's sure going really fast. So here we go. I want to show you Mars in a square to Jupiter in Cancer. Now Mars is in its detriment in Libra. It is, and we've talked about this already in the last report, that Mars in Libra is very measured, but also weaker at its weakest, and so can find itself again overcompensating because it doesn't really want to be measured and equitable and fair. It wants to just lop off heads, right? And so Mars being in Libra, I think, has really kind of forced the issue for everybody to be more diplomatic and balanced, as opposed, and put our personal energy into that as opposed to anywhere else, Mars. So when it's in a square to Jupiter, it actually can be a really good thing. It gives energy and initiative to start new projects. So Mars might be weak here, but Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. And so this square, I think, is actually going to work in a way that does give energy and initiative, because Jupiter can endlessly expand that which stabilizes us in the sign of Cancer, right? It is cardinal water. So there's no limit to its spread, or it is where it can, that root system can go. It's a very attractive energy when Mars and Jupiter are in a square, but it can be a little coarse or tactless. Less so because Mars is in Libra, I think, unless you're a heavy Aries person or whatever, and Mars in Libra has just been making you so angry and just like that you are holding it together so much. So the best way to harness this impulsive energy is to use forethought and strategy. Avoid acting rationally without considering the consequences of your bold actions. Remember, we've been talking about how what we put out there, for ourselves, inevitably can, it actually does affect the whole, and there's a responsibility to that. And, it's okay to realize that you want to make changes on that front. It's never too late, right? So Mars square Jupiter transit gives the courage to take on our adversaries if you're feeling threatened, but also a defensive approach can be, especially Jupiter in Cancer, right? That is very protective here. It's not about going on the attack so much as being on the defensive and being enthusiastic and pumped up about whatever it is that we want to initiate. You just have to moderate the energy output. You know what I mean? There could be a lot on the front end of something like this, and then you don't have anything to finish it out. So there's a tendency to burn out with this transit, leading to physical or emotional exhaustion. I would just caution you, especially with Venus and Leo, and really just cooking through Leo by the time we get to this point. that we're going to be really feeling, and really valuing that passion that moves through us with Leo and Venus there. It's going to be very embodied, right? Be embodied in value and materiality and relationships and projects and all the Venus themes, right? We're really going to be like engaged in the battle, I would say, when we get to this point. And so the Mars square Jupiter aspect, I think, is really going to be a nice, turbo infusion in this moment. But you don't want to burn out, because we need to get to the top of that staircase, folks. You can't just like start sprinting up there and thinking you're going to maintain that stamina, right? Now, and we're going to finish out here because we're pretty much there. Hold on here. Here we go. It's right after this. So this is Thursday the 4th. Friday is the 5th, and this is about the time that Uranus is going to station, as you can see here, at 2 degrees Gemini. And then the next day, the very next day, is the eclipse, the full moon lunar eclipse, right? So in my experience, Uranus retrogrades usually do just bring kind of crazy shit out of nowhere. So I'm not saying it has to happen all the time, but in my experience, that certainly has been the case in the past. That doesn't mean it will always be the case. It could just be a rapid shift within yourself as the retrograde. It also, it's important to know where it is in your chart right now in relation to everything else in all of your other charts. But for the most part, there's like some shit that just comes out of nowhere that comes along with a retrograde of Uranus. So just be aware of that on the heels of a full moon lunar eclipse, with the moon being in Pisces conjunct the North Node, right? It is taking us to our soul's evolution, but it is distorted and, well, it's fully eclipsed. The moon will be fully eclipsed. And so the distortion will be very full, and knowing that moment that normally is fully illuminated about our inner strength is going to be something that goes deep within and takes then the next 6 months to really come to fruition itself and to be realized. So whatever it is with Uranus, stay as open-minded about it as you can, because how you respond to that rapid, and it might not be something that happens to you, it could be something that happens transpersonally to the collective in a network of some sort, Uranus being. Now, I thought maybe it would be something with the internet, perhaps it would be something with the monetary system, or a crash of some sort, especially crypto, maybe. I mean, I'm not really into making those predictions necessarily, but it could be something. It could just be an about face in terms of what you know, right? Or communication, because that is Gemini. So whatever it is, it also, because of the degree that it represents, which is staying open to the spiritual blessings, it could be a collection of those things, right? Something a windfall that you didn't even anticipate. You were just leaving yourself open to receive. You actively put out the stockings for Santa to fill, and Uranus retrograde is you get up and they're like, shit, they're full. Now, it just depends on who you are and how they're going to be filled. They could have all kinds of stuff in there. So, but that's really going to, it's really going, that energy is going to go into that full moon lunar eclipse. And we want to be very mindful of that. So trying to keep an open mind, be aware of the multiple layers of things happening, realize that just because things, rapidly change doesn't mean it's necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's about how you approach it. And if you are seeing the beginning from the end, and you stay in that place and you remember this new moon energy, which is, again, seeing the forest for the trees, seeing the beginning from the end, those types of plot twists. Ooh, I just got a chill on that one. Those type of plot twists, even if you can anticipate the plot twist, if you a lot of time, I do this all the time in movies, and I don't know if it's because I just feel like that a lot of movies now are just, they're so predictable. There aren't a lot of movies that really give a plot twist that really surprise me anymore. So, but I feel like Uranus might be that in its retrograde. We're gonna find out. So, but then and then we have the full moon lunar eclipse. So, my friends, I'm gonna end the forecast there. Let's just bring that staircase back up real quick while I tell you about the eclipse forecast. So we have a full moon total lunar eclipse on the 7th of September. We have a partial solar eclipse on the 21st of September, which is at the equinox. So that forecast is a 6-month forecast, and it's only going to be available to the Catalyst membership. So as I said earlier, if that's something you're interested in, you may want to consider any of the options to sign up. You get a discount, you get access to the energy readings, which are on the off weeks of the new and full moon forecast. And at the top level, the premium level, you get your own personal reading every month as well. So there's been a nice jump in that recently, and I'm really appreciative of that. And I love doing those readings. It's a mini reading. I look at your charts just for context, and then we pull cards and just give a little bit of a snapshot of what's going on for you that month. So everything's in the description box. If you have any questions, the email catalystenergies@gmail.com is there, and you can reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns. So, my friends, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all of you very much. We got some stairs to climb, folks, but that's what Virgo energy is all about. And if you can see the end from the beginning, it will take you step by step up this stairway to heaven, basically. So I think we have a lot to look forward to, but we have to put in the work, and we have to become, master manifesting generators. If you're into human design, I'm definitely a manifesting generator. So, but we all are on some level. So take care of yourselves, folks. Thank you for being here. Thank you for subscribing, liking, commenting. That would mean a lot to me. Certainly sharing the content as well makes a big difference. I'll see you on the full moon forecast, which will be a partial solar eclipse. Until then, take care of yourselves. I'll talk to you hopefully sooner than later, folks. Have a great weekend.